you guys have been in doing this for quite some time, and as we've said, as we've agreed on, that the pandemic is really just changing how we do things, right? So like looking at design and creativity and innovation though, as processes, how has your understanding and appreciation of these things change or evolve because of the pandemic?
I think there's a common thread, I think, in everything that I'm talking about, which is I think it really, this entire time has forced me, or in terms of self-reflection, realize that less is more. I didn't need XYZ. And this is everything from like, sometimes I order, delivery or takeout, and I realize portion sizes, I can get like 2 or 3 meals out of one portion, right? Like, so it's everything from like, this change of lifestyle has really forced us to think, do we really need that? Should I really spend money on that? What are the things that really, that I really need, that are really going to energize me, that are really going to bring me joy? And those are the things I should focus on. And so I think the things that have really changed during this time is like that kind of philosophy, heightened on everything, right? And so in terms of work, yes, I can spend every day on Zoom calls and have a meeting with every single person. Is that the best use of my time? Are we getting the most impact out of that? Are there better ways to still create connection? To Greg's point, it is, we did an hour lunch in the community just to be together. Does a digital hour lunch make sense? Probably not, right? And so how do we really rethink the focus, and where do we really, where should we prioritize? Where are we gonna get some of that? I think also on the opposite end, what I felt too, and I know this is something that a lot of companies are talking about too, but it's to also give each other permission that you are not going to be as efficient and as effective as you may have been before. There's a lot of things everyone is dealing with, either in their personal lives and in work, that and so we have to look at productivity in a slightly different way. Sure. And by doing that, it also gives you permission. So for me, I started this new role during the pandemic. I'm a very, as people will know me, I'm a very kind of go-getter, kind of starting out the gates, like have a lot of energy to want to change. But you realize that change is much slower in these set of conditions. Things are a little bit harder. You have to push the boulder, it's getting a little bit heavier. And so giving yourself permission, for me, it's like, oh, let's actually say for the next 6 months, it's all about foundational stuff. We're going to build the, as we mentioned, we're going to build the right rituals. We're going to build the right rhythms. We're going to hire the right people. We're going to take some time to, make sure we onboard them in the best way possible, so that we can do the sexier stuff 6 months later. So let's give us permission to not worry about having to wow each other all the time for the next, however a few months, but let's really just focus on, getting things set up so that we can, when we start, maybe trickle back into the office, and we still have a little bit of a different paradigm. One
of the good things though that comes out of that approach is that you would really think more of what matters the most.
I think so. Right? I think this whole thing has forced us to think about where we spend our time and energy. Because the things that used to you spend your time and energy on, that especially now in a pandemic where you feel like you spend that time and it's still not going anywhere, you feel that way more. And then you really start questioning it. And then, people's, propensity to be able to accept that now is a lot less. So it really forces you. So it's a tension though, because true. Some things I think still require grit. Some things still require the need to push through. So it's, what are those things that we know that at the end of the tunnel, we're going to be better for it. And then what are the things that we actually should just stop or change or redo in a different way in order to prioritize our time and energy?
I think it's a combination of those two. Pao and I were talking about this, and one of the things that we realize is that a lot of the people who have innovated, obviously our lens would be more focused here, but because of our work, we also obviously cast a wide net, and we've been trying to keep abreast of what's happening around. What we noticed that a lot of the things that really work these days are No longer about the platitudes, no longer about the general, vague motherhood statements. It's really focusing on what matters. That's one part of what Mike was saying, and really partnering that with grit, right?
Just
So
getting
like,
it done, just getting
you,
things done, and
you know, when you're an entrepreneur and suddenly 50% of your revenue is gone, you really need to be more specific. You need to really be tangible and specific as to where those opportunities would come from.
I think what Mike alluded to as well is something we're thinking about here too, and I appreciate it, which is do what you can now. Like, we're not doing our absolute best, we're doing absolutely the best we can, right? But we're preparing ourselves for when there's an emergent future that we are going to be looking at after. I mean, look, there's not going to be an after. We're going to evolve through this. There's going to be a version of this that we're going to have to deal with a little bit more consistency. Two things that I've been telling my team to think about. One is like, well, one, it's more just like a point of view about it, but like, you know, let's talk about will and grace, not the show. But the idea that, to your point about grit, is that we need to go through this. We need to have literally the will to move forward with the things we care about, but also give ourselves a little bit of grace in this time, because this is really externally, everything that's happening to all of us in our own ways are affecting us very directly, and indirectly through our work. We can be more effective or less effective, but we have to acknowledge that these are the things. So will and grace are two of the things that I've been leaning on a lot over the last few months. And then the last thing I've been doing, like the other thing I'm doing with myself, is asking myself the question, why is this so important right now? So whatever it is, if it's like, I'm gonna get on a call and talk with Bootleg, I'm gonna do X number of things during the day, I'm going to get involved in this meeting. Why is this so important to me? And it doesn't mean it's not important, but it helps them prioritize and understand why I'm passionate about doing something. If you can ask yourself that on every level, whether it's work, family, personal life, why is it so important? It gives meaning to that. And it gives you a lot more reason why you're committed to whatever it is. So why am I making paintings with my son? Why is that so important to me? I want to see how he's going to evolve as a creative person. I need an outlet to do something fun. So I'm going to make the time for that. I just signed up for a class just now before this. It's a 3-month music theory course online. And so I'm going to commit myself to that. Why is it so important? Because I really want to enjoy making music and get better at it and get the tools under control so that I can go directly to my creativity and not struggle as much. And that's important to me. So I will spend the time doing that. But those are things that I try to hold close, is those things, will and grace, and why is it so important?
That's interesting.
I like that.
Though I think like nowadays though, the answer to the why is it important, we're now dealing with that question on two levels, right? The immediate and the long term, which we usually do, but all the more now, because like what you said, Greg, right? Like this will evolve. But before, as you guys pointed out, evolutions usually take a while. But we know that there's going to be an evolution coming out sooner, right? Because of what's going to happen. So that question of why is it important to me needs to be both now and how things would transpire.
Yeah. And
one of my colleagues,
the conditions of it, like what Mike was saying earlier, like the conditions to be creative, the conditions to be motivated, the conditions to stay, the grit to stick with it. That is an act of ritual and habit and creating that. And we're evolving, right? We're doing this call on Zoom, right?
Yes,
the four of us
true.
together in different time zones, we were sitting in a room. Jump back last year, that wouldn't have been as much the norm as it is now. So these are evolutions.
Well, Pao and I are in the same time zone, really, but mentally, I don't know what time zone he is. but Greg, I just want, before I forget, I like what you said. Like both you and Mike, your role in your organizations would be to set up the culture so that your people will be creative, right? So it's really designing the organization so that they become creative. So you mentioned earlier, I like that, the rituals and the rhythms. How does that work today? How can you make sure that your people are creating without your intervention? Because that's the lasting legacy, right, of any creative leader, to make people who are creative on their own, which is basically what we want to do anyway on a normal day. But now that we're going through this, how do you go about it?
It's iteration, like anything else. And again, when I say will and grace, the grace to allow ourselves to make changes rapidly and to be okay with that. Everybody's seeking stability. Everybody wants something they can depend on or rely on. The fact is the ground is moving under our feet all the time. And so acknowledging that, like all the plates that as a leader you have to spin on this, but they will fall and break. Make no mistake, you're going to mess something up. And giving ourselves grace to say, this is all part of this environment, I think is important.
Sure.
How you keep people creative is trust and motivation by saying you are creative, no matter what is happening. You're here, at least at IDEO for me, like, and I think Mike will agree with this, you are here because we believe in your abilities and your talent and your creativity. That hasn't changed even if we're on Zoom. That hasn't changed if you're at home.
That's
so
true.
It's about making sure that people recognize that they're valuable, that they're creating things together, and the tools that have emerged and the ways that we've been doing this, at least at IDEO and in the way we work together. People have invented new ways to hack different tools. So I don't know if you guys use Figma in the work you do, but Figma as a tool, was a prototyping tool to create, kind of test ready websites and apps. But what we're using it for now is basically how we run our projects, our project rooms, where normally a collaborative design process can be 4 people in a room, really bashing things out on a regular basis, having communication and conversation. It all takes place in Figma, where we're sitting in Figma as a room and collaborating live and making sure things are happening, creating new rhythms of touching base during a day, giving ourselves heads down time. Sometimes I know designers that will work together, literally get on a Zoom call with the video off, just to be with each other. So people drawing, people are just hanging out, but it's still that feeling that there's somebody out there who you can, in the moment, like bounce ideas off of. So we're evolving the way we are creative, but it really boils down to trusting each other that this is what we do. And then encouraging each other that when we feel like the plates are falling or we're not as creative as we want to be, we give ourselves the grace to say, well, wait, how can we then move through that, use our will to get to a place where we are satisfied with our work, but give ourselves the grace to say, well, it's going to take a little longer. As Mike said, it's going to take a little more patience, and we have to navigate our communication styles.
I think there's a lot of, I think we talked about this too, but just like back to basics. Like, what are the things that drive creative people? Well, inspiration. Okay, how are we each getting inspired in this new world, right? And I think for everyone that might be different, but I think as a creative leader, our responsibility is to continuously inspire other people. Now we have to know how people can get inspired in this new world, right? But let's not forget that that's the thing that really kind of binds us all together. And so recently, some of the projects we've done, it's kind of back to the basics where, hey, we actually have to go talk to people and interview them and learn from them. And so let's not forget that we get so much from talking to other people, and we want to talk to more fascinating people. So, even in this digital world, actually what that buys us is people that we have access to that we never had access to before, right?
That's
because
true.
everyone's working, but now everyone's Zooming. So you have access to people that you never had before. And I just find like, there's been a lot of, sort of like quotable quotes out there that's, that's around like, you want to continuously meet with fascinating people that are way more fascinating than you are, because that's the only way you're going to kind of like learn stuff. And then you want to share it. Right. And so I think, we talk about it a lot in terms of the design process, right? Which is, it's a lot of learning, a lot of testing, and a lot of making. So we should continue to do that back to basics. And, because I think those are the things that at its core, we might have elevated it when we were all together and we were able to come up with new tools and new ways to do things. But at the core, it's around, just getting inspired, learning new things, and actually creating something out of it, I think is really, really key.
Yeah, and the idea of that inspiration as a designer, as a creative person, inspiration is your fuel. And so it's really important to make sure, and our friend Paul Bennett would say that, it's our job to be inspired. It is our jobs. And then the role of leaders to transmit that and expand that to people and let people find their own inspiration within it. I've been following, there's one thing I'll share here, like there's this Instagram account, if you want to look it up, called Moodboard Mondays, which is amazing. Every Monday they put up a new mood board made by a designer out in the world. Part of, a lot of IDEO folks are on there, a lot of creatives from all over. And it's really cool because you just basically see what's, a mood board is basically a map of someone's creative brain. Like, what is inspiring you? What are the things?
That's true.
In lieu of me being able to step into a project room and see what a team is working on, something like Moodboard Mondays is like, well, what is this person thinking about and what does it look like? And getting a tour of people's creative brains is really cool.
Sure.
And I'm weirdly enough trying to find inspiration in various places. There's a few designers that I work with and that I'm inspired by the illustrations they do and the work they do. There's also, I want to go back, there's one thing that made me think about this. There's a guy called Yadon Israel, and he's on Instagram. And during the height of when we had the Black Lives Matter movement, which is continuing here in America, but like at the height of it, he was doing these classes online, teaching people about the power of active voice. And he's a teacher, and he's been talking about how this works. So his Instagram live was basically him with a notebook writing out his theories about how using active voice in headlines or in communications can be used to really draw attention to the real subject of the issue at hand. And he just did this on his notebook. And I send that around to so many people, and it inspired me to think, like, how am I actually depending on all these tools and all these things when literally writing it down and sharing it with somebody could be just as effective? And it was a really powerful set of lessons. He continues to do them. I highly recommend you look at them, because from a writing and English standpoint, I'm like, wow, you really blew my mind, dude. But like, this is the power of inspiration, is to find people out there who are doing something that you're not doing or that you'd love to do more of, and engage with it. So I'm curious for you guys, like, how are you actually getting inspired right now? What are the things you're looking at?
I'm fortunate enough that I have a 3-unit class in Ateneo. Greg might be familiar with Ateneo. So that's one of the universities here, and I teach there. I have an elective on introduction to creativity and innovation. So at a given time, I have a connection to at least 20 to 30 students coming from a variety of courses, because they're so I might have a smattering of people coming from the psych department, from the engineering, whatever, and it's a class on creativity. So I'm always learning from these guys, right? So my at the start of the sem, I tell them to choose a field of interest, personal field of interest. No idea yet, just give me a personal field that you're going to play around with throughout the sem. Only rule is it has to be personal. It could be a personal hobby. It could be an affliction. So you have all of these kids talking about their interests, and then I guide them through the creative process. So, and at the end of the sem, I ask them, now that you've gone through the whole program, I want you to create your own model of creativity. And again, I learn from, because I tell them, you're in a class on creativity. The ultimate output should be you guys creating your own framework of creativity. And usually they would obviously cull from their favorites. So suddenly I'm learning about this manga artist, this whatever. So yeah, I've operationalized Monday mood boards in that regard. That's my cheat code, man. But Pao, I think, can share more specific, because obviously as a director, he's plugged in. His mood boards are always updated.
Well, I think generally I've taken taken up a philosophy of trying to say yes to as many things as I can. Whether it's a project that I may not be familiar with, or maybe more specifically like, for example, I just finished a shoot for Uniqlo Japan, and it was a global campaign, and the team that we ended up having wasn't my normal team. So I think we
fish out of water. I
literally worked with, I think, only one person that I've worked with before, and everyone else were like people I've worked only with for the first time. And I find that I learned so much from just trying to learn how to communicate my idea better, rather than having a shorthand. I used to value that a lot, having a shorthand with my core team, my cinematographer, my production designer, and just, you know, pointing at something and just making a little facial expression, and they would already get what I'm saying. But I find that getting yourself out of your comfort zone deliberately and being heightened and being a bit more aware, I learn more stuff. I learned from this new DP that I worked with. She was I worked with her for the first time, and she had a different aesthetic, and I learned a lot from that. And other experiences. I mean, like stuff that I never thought that I would try. I mean, I just recently tried trail riding on a motorcycle, and it scared the shit out of me. and I literally thought I was gonna die, but but yeah, I mean, it also made me realize, you know, that I don't know. I mean, in some way, it kind of gave me some ideas on how to work on a certain project. I mean, you make these connections when you're doing something completely different, and I think that was very important for me to kind of set myself. Okay, this shit scares me. I'm not too comfortable with the company that I'm gonna be with, but yeah, I mean, it's, you know, what else am I gonna do, or maybe I should try this. Or when else am I gonna try this? And then you always get something. I mean, and it'll be for a totally unrelated project. Maybe it's something that's very similar, but you definitely try to get as much input and new experiences as you can. So that's
Are you guys are you familiar, Paul, with the artist Takeshi Murakami?
yeah,
So
of course. Yeah.
so if you follow his Instagram, he's been making a film, and it's really interesting to watch how it's like this weird like tech mecha character driven weird thing. He's been designing. He's making the film. He designed all the mecha. It's like this crazy.
Animation.
No, it's live action with CGI. And
Okay.
that's what's nuts, is
Okay.
to see him translate his aesthetic of, like, you know, the flowers and the really like
Oh, shit.
maximalist stuff.
Nice.
But he's actually creating this really cool sort of sci-fi manga, Ghost in the Shell type situation. And so he goes through in his Instagram and talks about, like, how hard it's been to learn how to do this in a different medium than he's used to. And then you can see the aesthetic and the way he approaches, like, editing on. So he works with 3D designers to design the mecha. And so, you know, that's not his field, but what he does is he goes in and looks at it as if it was his work, because he works with a lot of assistants, you know, to drive things. And they go through and show how Murakami-san, like, puts together edits and looks at how he thinks about the shape of a spider mecha that he's designing and how he directs. And it's just really cool to watch someone who's totally not comfortable with this medium go into it, because he's a master in his field, try to take something on. I learned a lot just by watching it, the humility and sort of the openness you have to try something new, and at the great risk of budget and reputation and all these other things. Like, it doesn't matter, you just go do it. And I love that. I think what you're talking about, of taking risks and learning from new people and doing different things, like, risk is a big feature.
Yeah. No, that project turned out okay. And yeah, no, there really is something about, especially if it's something that you feel that you're really good at already, and you already have all these
Yes.
muscle
Shorthands.
shorthand and muscle memory, and all of a sudden it's like trying to write with your left hand, and there's something that comes out that's quite interesting, and it's scary because, of course, I mean, it's my first project with Uniqlo Japan, and you know, it's not something that I want to fuck up. So it was a bit of a risk. Actually, I took a while deciding on the team. My production manager was kind of, well, so who are we getting? And up to the last minute, I was really on the fence, and I'm glad I chose otherwise. I'm glad I chose the way I chose, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how Takeshi Murakami is trying to translate his ideas and his processes into a completely new medium. We'll definitely check that out. You know, when that's coming out? I mean, how far along is he in in that
I'm not sure
project?
exactly how far along he is, and it may be very much a retrospective thing, honestly. Like he's just
Oh,
showing snippets from what he's done.
okay.
But check it out, because I think
Yeah,
the
yeah.
most valuable thing, and this is true whenever I've been obsessed with watching like creation documentaries, like how people make stuff, and
Yes.
like
Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
I
That's been a
really
big
love
thing.
watching, right? Like how people make, like,
Yeah,
can I
yeah.
just tell you,
Yeah.
this is the side story. I'm obsessed. Well, my wife and I are both obsessed with this show on Netflix here in the States called, it was like American Barbecue Cook-Off or something, where you can watch people who are barbecue masters
Yeah.
create barbecue. And
Yeah.
so the most
Yeah.
American thing we could do is to order a bunch of barbecue and
Right.
watch a show about barbecue, which we did. But like, it's awesome to watch their process. And so I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know where the film came out, where it comes out, but like, I just
I think
want to
it's
see how
always
he made it.
interesting to watch people who are so in love with a
Yeah,
process,
craftsmen.
whatever it is.
And then they're just
Yes.
obsessed.
One
Love it.
thing, yeah, obsessed with just one thing. It is,
Yeah.
it's a deep
One of
dive into it. Yeah.
one of the things that I and Pao knows this, I go on a movie marathon, and it'll be over a course of, let's say, months, where I would just binge a director's filmography. So if it's Woody Allen, I'll go from start to finish.
Dive.
Hitchcock, but doing so also allows you to learn about how these directors evolve. And it's it's also a master class in seeing how they evolve with their craft, with the command of the form and the function. Anyway, but you always have to balance it, right? So like in like this whole month, I've been watching new stuff like The Boys or
Oh my gosh, love The
Cobra
Boys.
Kai, or
I
exactly,
just
right?
got into boys, and yeah,
That's so good.
it's really good. It's really
Don't
good.
watch it
But
with your
I
kids. Don't watch it with your kids. Just don't watch it with
Definitely. But I interject that with news radio or
right.
whatever,
Amazing.
right? So
News radio,
I mean,
amazing.
So
exactly.
wait, we talked about Will
And
and Grace and news radio in the same conversation. So
Let's
that's
not bring up
incredible.
West Wing. West Wing.
Oh yeah, no,
is a
West
whole-
Wing.
yeah.
Yeah.
going to that, being uncomfortable with things, right? You can do it in these small things. If you think about it, it's a bit schizophrenic. In one day, you go from let's say The Boys to news radio to 1940s film noir, for instance, and it does something to your head.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
that
It's a
it
mood
just
board for your
kind
brain.
of
Yeah, it's definitely a different
it
kind
is
of
a
mood
mood
board.
board.
Yeah.
And then
It's a mood.
in between, you take on client calls. You it's like, and you're zooming with your team, and so it's, in a way, I remember, and there's so many research on this, that we become more creative when we are going through change, right? So they know, there's a study, I don't remember now, that the minute you travel to a different country, instantly you're more creative, right? There's something in your head that just rearranges itself, and it becomes more creative. And I think that's one of the biggest things that the pandemic would bring about, right? Because everyone is going through all of these changes, from the shallowest of the shallow to the most profound changes in our behavior. So, people would, and adding to the fact that, bringing back what we mentioned earlier, that we're now more conscious of our routines and our rhythms, right? It'll be, I think people will just be more creative in more specific ways, right? Again, I want to ground that with specificity, not just some motherhood statement, right?
To build on that idea of like how we're being creative, one story I can tell you is that within IDEO, when we were locked down and everybody's working from home, we tried to figure out a way, how can we bring everyone together in a really creative way through Zoom that could be
So
as magical, right, as what we've done in our past when we all got together. And so one meeting that we typically do is, and Mike's been there, I really have only been to one. They have partner meetings and leadership meetings, and they bring everybody to San Francisco and do these things. This year, we opened it up, to everybody at IDEO and said, hey, how do we get together and have a week of programming where, like the Olympics, where you create daily rhythms that are accessible to Asia, to North America, to Europe, and let loose the community to figure out how do we make this really fun. And so we did this thing called the May Frenzy, which basically became this free-for-all creative programming moment where on every hour of every day for this week, there were events that people all over the world, the 700 plus of us at IDEO, programmed these little hours of things like, you know, one of my friends here, one of our colleagues did a conversation about Iranian folk music and talk about community and as it relates to folk music. We had live meditation. We had audio acid trips, which is what they called it, where someone leads you down this path through audio. We were all of us were all individually laying down in our spaces, listening to her voice, guiding us through these things. We had collaborative collage building with 300 people at the same time on Google Slides. And so there are ways to create these new moments in this, and that was an experiment. It was called a frenzy for a reason. It was a little crazy. Not everybody could participate in it. You know, we do have to get work done, but like, it was so fun. And at the end, people were crying. There were moments of revelation that people were like, wow, we can still be a community in this time. And that really made me optimistic about all this, because we can still hold together and still take a risk in doing something new, change our rhythm, but still be us. And that's what I loved about it.
We should end on that. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Greg.
I know.
Well, I mean, look, anytime you guys want to have a conversation, and this is really fun.
Yeah,
it was nice to speak with you all.
We enjoyed. We joined. I think I speak for Paul, but obviously he can speak for himself. But you know, I think we didn't follow our script, didn't follow the questions so much, and that's what's more interesting, right? I mean, it was free flowing. Yeah, that was good.